Hey everyone, what's up? So, last time I covered the school arc of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and I tried to convey that the arc builds up the themes of friendship through the use of episodic chapters, and a bit more importantly, the shoddy chapters of 13 through 20. I think this is done most effectively through the characters of Yugi and Jonouchi, whose friendship is meant to be the backbone of the story. In this video, we are going to cover the second arc of the manga, known as Death Tea. In my opinion, this arc is an improvement of what came before, and is arguably where Takahashi hit his stride. So sit back and watch as we delve into the twisted world that is Death Tea. So, firstly, I'd like to say that this arc is fantastically paced. From the moment this arc opens all the way to the ending, you're never really overloaded with action, and the slower character driven moments are never left to feel, too slow or like they're dragging. And let me just say, this arc also opens with a banger of a chapter. Picking up right where the previous arc left off, following Yugi and Jonouchi's run in with, the Bruce Lee wannabe, it's here where Mokuba is reintroduced, now challenging Yugi and Jonouchi to a game of food-based Russian roulette. Okay, here I'd like to briefly mention that it became quickly apparent to me in this section that Mokuba is very focused on one thing. He wants to defeat Yugi, but not for himself. He wants to do it for Kaiba. Mokuba is desperate for his brother's acceptance and will do anything he thinks Kaiba will praise him for. Though something misguided here is I highly doubt Kaiba would accept it if Mokuba beat Yugi. I want to expand more on that a little later though. Before we get too deep into Kaiba and his relationship with Mokuba, let's talk a bit more about the rest of the arc. So the meat of this arc is that the ultimate game that was hinted previously that Kaiba was building is actually a special section of his indoor theme park Kaiba Land. This special section is called Death Tea. Yugi's first moments in this park involve him witnessing Kaiba beating Sugoroku in a duel and then forcing him into a penalty game. And in my opinion, it's a great callback to Kaiba's previous appearance. This chapter, chapter 27, reintroduces Kaiba by forcing Sugoroku to experience death via virtual reality, with the frame of Sugoroku seeing the monsters being composed with a very similar angle and setup to when Kaiba had experienced the same thing at the end of chapter 10. This is one of my favorite visual storytelling techniques, where an author or screenwriter can connect two scenes, either with a shared character, as this does, or just thematically. An example for thematically being Star Wars. I am a big Star Wars fan, and Lucas uses this technique constantly in the prequels to call back to the original films. For now, I just want to highlight the scene where Anakin is found by Palpatine on Mustafar. This mirrors a scene from A New Hope where Obi-Wan finds Luke after his run-in with Tusken Raiders. Luke is found by his soon-to-be Jedi Master and the manifestation of light in the film, in an area bathed in light before starting his hero's journey. Now, Anakin is laying in a hellish environment bathed in darkness and lava as the manifestation of evil. Darth Sidious, his new Sith master, kneels over him in a very similar position Kenobi was doing when checking on Luke. All of that to say, I love this scene, and I think it's an incredible way to reintroduce Kaiba. So, Yugi and Jonouchi are then told by Kaiba to participate in Death Tea, otherwise Sugoroku will die, which begins to create stakes right off the bat for Yugi. He's actually first told to go alone, but Jonouchi, agrees to help him because they're, tight. As does Honda, actually, who just happens to be there because he's watching his toddler nephew. Not really crazy about the nephew, honestly. I mean, he does one cool thing. You'll see why. It's great. I would also like to say I was a little taken aback by Honda being written into the story like this, but I quickly accepted it because of the nephew of it all. But he wasn't the only character written in like this. And the other one, I think, is a bit less natural. That would be Anzu, who they meet working for the first game. She had just started that day after having been fired from Burger World for punching a guy who touched her butt. I'd have no problem with that if Kaiba had had a plan for this, but he doesn't. He had no idea who she even was and was just as surprised to find out who she is. She's just there to be in the arc, which is okay, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, This is a manga written for kids and teenagers. But I still think it's more of a forced way of writing her in because, there could have been a better way to have her in there. So, Honda helps lessen this feeling that I have for Anzu just a little bit when he contributes to the story by actually figuring out the first game and even becomes the victor. When originally reading, I was kind of worried that he was just going to be there to fill up space, but he immediately proves why he has to be there. Actually, I think it's important that I mention that every character contributes in some way to the games going forward. Even Joji, which I wasn't expecting. I mean, he beats the mini game between games 1 and 2 by literally just shitting on the game master's lap, which honestly got a huge laugh out of me. As much as I may think Joji is a bit much, he at least pulls his weight. Until he gets kidnapped by a murderer and then immediately just goes to sleep for the rest of the arc because there was nothing left for him to do. That murderer section, though, is actually pretty interesting. This whole arc goes out of its way to show how far Kaiba has fallen in his life. He's to the point that not only was this concept brought to life by him, but he hires professional killers in the previous game and a genuine slasher for this one to try to kill Yugi, just because Yugi beat him at a card game. Another fun thing about this section is it's, another example of people being burned alive in this manga. What is this, the third or fourth time now? Following this is one of my personal favorite sections of this arc. Yugi begins to doubt himself and blames himself for getting everyone into this, even though they chose to get involved. Here, Jonouchi gives Yugi a speech about self-hatred and what it takes to love yourself. The fact that what it took for him and Honda to change was meeting Yugi. Returning that puzzle piece to you took more courage than anything. But just then, I started to like myself a bit. Let me just say that the dub of the Duel Monsters anime never prepared me for this scene here. This scene exemplifies the theme of friendship that permeates this series and almost had me in tears. My hat's off to you, Takahashi. That's not all Death Tea has to offer, though. This is also where Anzu is given a bit more to do than fan service. I know, I'm shocked too. She's the one to notice that the game they're forced into has a set rhythm to it, which is honestly nice because it actually ties into her lifelong dream of being a dancer. Following the game is a fantastic scene where Yugi confides in Jonouchi and Anzu, and finally admits that he's been blacking out and that there's another Yugi. Something that the two of them have been starting to kind of suspect since the Shoddy incident, and something Yugi himself had been unable to accept until now. But their words of encouragement and bond brings him to finally accepting the spirit of the puzzle. This is the moment that makes the rest of the series and the teamwork that Yugi and Dark Yugi will show possible. Now, here is where I would officially like to start discussing Kaiba. Kaiba is the twisted CEO of Kaiba Corp, and the methods he used to get that position are honestly deplorable. But before getting into that part of Kaiba, I would like to delve a little more into Kaiba's relationship with his brother. Kaiba and Mokuba's relationship is best exemplified in this latter portion of the arc, where a conversation is shown wherein Kaiba tells Mokuba that brotherly love is an illusion, and that only trusting in oneself is the best way to secure victory, which is a great parallel to Shoddy's mindset in the last arc, where he tells Yugi that his friendships will only hold him back. Kaiba in this arc seems to be a manifestation of those very ideals that Shoddy had previously tried to enforce onto Yugi. The idea of this truth where you can only get anywhere by isolating yourself and forcing everyone out of your life, even the one connection that should mean everything to him. You can see how deeply this hurts Mokuba too, with the look that's just painted on his face, but Kaiba just doesn't care. This truth of Kaiba's is also highlighted when comparing him to our heroes. He points out himself that their friendship makes them a better team than he expected, but the part he wasn't expecting is that at the same time, that friendship is also what gives Yugi the ability to accept the confidence buried deep beneath the surface, the confidence that manifests as the spirit of the puzzle. Kaiba is fighting for pride, while Yugi is fighting for those that he cares about. It's selfishness versus selflessness. You could say it's cliche, but I think it works really well here. Mokuba even sees this contrast between the two after Death T4 when Yugi saves Mokuba from the torment that Kaiba was about to show him. Aside from his relationship with Mokuba and his contrast to Yugi, I would like to point out what Kaiba has done to get to this point. Kaiba obtained his 3 blue eyes by hunting down the collectors and blackmailing or threatening them into giving him the cards. One person even committed suicide, which Kaiba seems to take great pride in. He even became CEO of Kaiba Corp by convincing the Big Five to vote his father out of the position and place him into it. This led his father to jumping out of the boardroom window, falling to his death. His final words to Kaiba, "This is what a loser deserves." With all of this in mind, let's move on to the moment these two ideals come to a head. Death T5, Yugi versus Kaiba. This duel is not just a duel for Yugi's life, but a duel of truths and personalities for these two characters. Something I really like is that this duel is just heightened for me thanks to the previous arc, largely in the sense that we have seen the shared history between these two characters. What sparked this moment, even if it was just Yugi beating someone in a card game, I mean, come on. But ultimately, it helps really create a really nice villain for this section. A villain that you've come to understand due to his backstory shown in this arc and what we've seen from the previous arc. I also like the way we've seen Yugi struggle against the likes of Shoddy and others, but never up to this point has he gone against a better foil than he has here. Kaiba has a deck of monsters that are just pure power. Yugi, however, has a deck of weaker monsters, but it contains one monster buried inside that requires 5 cards to summon. Exodia, the Forbidden One. This monster, to me, is the representation of the theme of friendship. The idea of multiple cards that alone are weak but together create the most powerful monster in the game, and it will allow you to succeed if you believe in it. And also, it goes back to what Kaiba had said earlier. They work better as a team. After Yugi manages to summon Exodia, he performs the Mind Crush penalty game on Kaiba, which shatters his soul into pieces, destroying the darkness within him and leaving Kaiba in a catatonic state while he mentally rebuilds his soul. Kaiba until this point was a monster who only cared for himself and led multiple people to their deaths, including his own father, Gozuboro Kaiba. Not that his father was a better person, mind you, there's a reason Kaiba is the way he is. Here, I'm left with a sense of pity for Kaiba, but also a sense of hope. Hope that Mokuba will one day get to see his brother smile again, and finally be able to connect with him in the way that they had been as children. So, all in all, I really liked this arc. Definitely my favorite of the two covered so far, though if I had to point out anything I didn't like, it would be the use of both Joji and Anzu. Like I said, she had a fairly contrived reason to be there, and while she helps solve one game, she spends the rest of the arc being groped by Joji or machines. I don't think she's a terrible character, by the way, I just think there could have been a better way to introduce her into the arc and utilize her. Aside from that, I really liked this arc, and I especially liked the development for both Yugi and Kaiba. I hope y'all are looking forward to the next arc as much as I am. Join me next time as I tackle the Monster World, and we get our first introductions of one of the longest lasting villains in this series, Dark Bakura.